Merci. Alors,
Thank you. How to make the economy more human? Well, this morning we saw that there was an economic recovery, but not for everyone. The crisis has generated costs and jeopardized jobs, and there are major inequalities between the regions in the European Union. They're quite significant, and I've noted two statistics which struck me. The 40 percentage point gap between the employment rate in southern Italy and in a region in Finland. And the crisis affects young people more, so the lost generation, as well as the elderly and women. The Europe 2020 strategy, this offers a huge opportunity, but it seems to be sidelined and doomed to failure for various reasons, lack of economic recovery and the austerity measures introduced over recent years. And so Europe is no longer a factor of social cohesion. Indeed, sometimes it's perceived as being responsible for the decline in social rights. So to save Europe 2020 strategy, a number of things were put on the table this morning. Firstly, a democratic pillar, so involving citizens, because hitherto civil society has not been sufficiently involved and not in an adequate way. So we need an answer. But in terms of changing governance, I think it needs to be taken out of the hands of the technocrats. There are other players, and the strategy has to fully involve civil society. We didn't manage to draw the lessons of the failure of the Lisbon strategy, because even before the crisis, the democratic gulf widened. Economic integration benefited the richest countries with public policies basically constituted of fiscal and social dumping. In terms of solidarity, local solidarity initiatives, well, some have been introduced over the recent years and during the first years of the EU 2020 strategies, but those can't replace public policies, ensuring that we have inclusive public policies. So the institutions at a national and a European level have a fundamental role to play. Cohesion policies have to involve redistribution of wealth so that we have a common destiny for European citizens. We need an end to competition by the market based on a system which can respond to social justice and mutual respect amongst people. We need to promote access to common goods, so education, healthcare, security. European policies have to guarantee access in a fair way to these common goods, irrespective of people's economic means. So we need access to capital, step up the fight against tax havens, finally developing a social protection system, as well as minimum revenue, social protection, which is not a burden on labour, and it constitutes solidarity. So we supported the idea that we need to be paying attention to this idea. And finally, the European institutions have to support the social solidarity system as compared to other economic models, and just include the situation is urgent. The European Council will be meeting in a couple of days' time, focusing on the European semester and the EU 2020 strategy, and we hope that the recommendations and the information that's been provided today will be picked up on and listened to. European elections in 2 months' time. We're going to have to be able to respond to the deep social crisis and ensure that citizens once again have trust in the institutions. The best solution is solidarity between the member states, having a growth model which is based on linking social progress with economic performance. Thank you.
Much, Laura. Merci beaucoup. So now we're going to hear what the presidents and vice president present have to say about these first remarks. I would like to remind that we are going to be very strict on the time and that you have 2 minutes each of you to react. So I would like to ask Luca to be the first one to start for this round, and then we are going to switch a little bit the order afterwards.
Merci.
Thank you. There are two aspects of my training which are often criticized, both as a journalist and an economist. You can't get worse than that, anyway. A journalist and economist at the same time. Italian as well. Well, that might be a trump card because we've got some imagination and can overcome all those contradictions. Economists have a bad habit when asked for analysis to just say it's the economy, it's stupid. And, you know, there's no argument against it. You have to follow it. It's quite brutal. Now, the Queen of Great Britain asked her in 2009 for the opening of an academy in Oxford following the financial crisis, turned to academics and economists saying, well, what are we paying for? You weren't able to predict the crisis. Well, the economy is a science which explains afterwards, never before, what you have to do. Here we're in a case where for a long time now, we know what has to be done for Europe, especially in the economic area. We've known that for a long time. There are two things we know. Firstly, we've learned that a certain model that thought we could do without industry, it's not possible. We discovered that a bit late in the day, unfortunately. It was a certain ideology, which came indeed from the United Kingdom. And the argument was, you've got to work in a sector of high added value. They're from a financial sector or after-sales service and let people outside of Europe do the rest. But now we've discovered that if GDP, remember, 20% generated by manufacturing industry, but it's all important on the set. So industrial policy, energy policy, business policy, research policy, the internal market for services that generate good and sustainable growth. That was already in the Lisbon strategy in Europe 2020. It had just been forgotten. Now, it's true that we're running the risk of Europe 2020 failing, but we must remember that it's the first exercise that Europe has entered into in a bid to establish an overall economic policy for the continent as a whole. It needs to be improved, and I hope it will be. Policy viewed as a whole is balanced between the economic aspect, the generation of wealth, justice, fairness, and sustainability. These are the three axes of a Lisbon strategy. So the exercise I pursue now is to achieve this right balance from the economy is stupid and the figures on the debt. To balance that with future prospects. The crisis changed the starting position, but we need to work within the new context. Thank you.
The second group.
Bon, en ce qui concerne les économies.
Thank you. As regards economists, they're almost all, I wouldn't say all, but they're almost all. I mean, question mark on a very small percentage of them. Their profits after the event. I'm just wondering where they were, all those economists in 2008, in terms of predicting the financial crisis. And it was the poorest that paid for it. It wasn't the rich people who paid the cost of the crisis. It was the wage earners, self-employed people. So the lower categories of the population. So take what economists say with a pinch of salt. I think that in terms of the first rapporteur, that was a very good summary in a very short period of time. Talking about an economy for Europe rather than an economy for Europe, rather than a Europe for the economy. I would say what we need is an economy in the service of citizens. What we see is that there's not much point in investing in the real economy. I think where wealth is generated, well, if you want to generate wealth, people prefer to speculate. I think one of the proposals of the European Economic and Social Committee, and obviously not the only one saying this, but we have an official text, what we asked of the European Commission is to come forward with a proposal for taxation of financial transactions. Mr. Barroso's listened to us 3 years late. Well, better late than never. But we're still waiting for this to be implemented. ultimately, somebody say that this is what Europe is, Mr. Cameron. We can't accept that in the name of the sacrosanct place that the City of London has, we should allow the speculators to continue to get rich. Laura also talked about redistribution of wealth. This is fundamental. If we think that we're going to build Europe with a large percentage of the population living in poverty to a greater or lesser extent, we're wrong. So I think that is absolutely crucial that we move towards a better distribution of wealth because it's this European community which over decades ensured that there was a redistribution of wealth. There was talk of social justice. That's lacking, social justice. It's almost totally lacking. Nonetheless, I think it's here in this House that the Charter of Fundamental Human Rights started, as it were. It ultimately was culminated in the Asylum Declaration in Strasbourg between François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl. So we have the tools, but it seems that we don't want to make use of the tools that we have. It's also true what Laura was saying. In the minds of many people who are living in poverty, they have the impression that it's the EU that's the reason for the poverty they find themselves in. And I said this morning, we have to highlight the wonderful assets, advantages of the European Union and criticise what's not working in order that we can then improve that. Yes, I can see that the moderator is annoyed, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. I am very sorry for cutting you off. It's not very polite of me, I know, but it is important that we stick to our time schedule. So could I ask Ms. Klasnich, I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
Thank you for the floor. And I do apologize. I'm not an economist or an economist who's have difficulty reading. Anyway, I'm in this group now, so I'd like to thank the young woman for telling us about her experiences between the economy and Europe. Well, I have a business background. I used to have a small company, and we always got a feeling that there was a dichotomy between the employee and the employer, but actually we're all in the same boat. In the ESC, NGOs, employers and employees take decisions together. And I think that would be a model which we could and should extend to other member states. In some member states, the situation could be improved. In some, it's working quite well already, but all the same, civil society could be incorporated even in those success stories to include their opinion. Now, health, education, human rights are all major topics, among others, in this group. And here, Laura, let me respond to you and say, I think the largest failing is this, and I was a politician for 35 years. I think the largest error is that people only start discussing issues shortly before the elections, because they think we've got elections coming up. No, we've got to start. No, that's wrong. The campaign for the next election starts the day after the last, so you have to consider issues all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to the second workshop report, we have a couple more. Is this working? Yeah? No? No. So before we move on to the report of the second working group, we have a couple more quiz questions to introduce the topics. So if we go back one slide. Forwards. Okay. So, micro-enterprises. They're an important part of the economy in Europe. But what percentage of the EU workforce do they employ? We have three options. 12%, 29%, 53%. Who? We had some. Too many hands there.
3.
You're saying 3?
You're saying 3?
3 is the correct answer. 53% of the EU workforce.
Before you.
Can you do the
Yes.
honors with the gift? We have them prepared. Thank you. And for the quiz question connected with the second workshop, if we go on 2 slides. Okay. Giuseppe, as you know, is Secretary General of the European Youth Forum. And we've heard, I think all of us many times, how much more the EU spends on cows than they do on young people. But how much more do they spend on cows than they do on young people?
Yeah,
Giuseppe.
again, we have 3 options. One is 5.6 euro for 1 cow, for 3.2 for 1 young person, 12.7 per cow per 1.26 per young person, 25.4 euros per cow, and 10 euros 0.3 per young person. The data is referring to the past multi-annual financial framework. Number 2. He was faster.